Based upon your change of plea, it's a judgment of the court that you're guilty of amended count 1, which is child or vulnerable adult abuse under an intentional or knowing standard, death or serious physical injury not likely. It's a class 4, non-dangerous, non-repetitive offense committed on or about October 26th of 2011 to October 25th of 2013. I forgot to write this down. It's a violation of ARS 13-1402 and 13-902, 13-118, and 13-3623. It's also judgment of the court you're guilty of count 13, indecent exposure to a minor under 15. It's a class 6 non-dangerous, non-repetitive offense committed on or about May 15th of 2016 through August 15th of 2016. Violation of ARS 13-1402 and 13-902E. I've read and considered the pre-sentence report. I've read and considered numerous victim letters, and victim family members have written into the court, Barry, that had a number of letters of support attached for Mr. Cornejo. I believe that that's everything that was submitted. Ms. Summers?
Yes, Judge.
What is your recommendation?
And I might have misheard for count 1 for this the end date. I thought I heard 2013 and it's 2017, but I might have.
That's my bad handwriting on that. 2017.
All right. Judges, yes. JD would like to provide a statement, and so if we could do that first.
Sure.
Good morning, Your Honor. This is a day I've looked forward to for a long time. Sitting down to write this statement, I've rewritten it countless times, struggling to find the right words to express the depth of my pain and the strength I've found here today. As I speak to you, I come to you as a 22-year-old woman, but I ask you see me as I once was a young little girl. Back then, I didn't have a voice to speak up for myself, but today I do. I've never had a father figure every child deserves. I've never experienced the kind of love and protection you see in movies where fathers share bonding moments with their children. Instead, I was forced to call my abuser dad, but he was no father, he was a monster. Not the kind of monster children imagine hiding under their beds. No, my monster lived in my home. He controlled everything in my life. I wasn't allowed to ask for simple things I needed or wanted without him expecting something in return. I wasn't allowed sleepovers, I wasn't allowed freedom, and I wasn't allowed a voice. The emotional impacts of his crimes have been devastating, leaving scars that I'm still learning to heal. As a child, I've spent sleepless nights trying to stay awake so the monster wouldn't come for me, but even when I was awake, there was no safety. I could hear his light footsteps inching towards my room in the dead of the night. To this day, certain sounds still make me feel like that terrified child again. I've been diagnosed with PTSD because of these crimes. It's a constant battle to trust others, to feel safe, and to reclaim my life. My husband has witnessed my struggles firsthand. He's held me through panic attacks in the middle of the night when my mind takes me back to those horrifying moments of my childhood bedtime. Bedtime is still not a safe space for me. It was the time the monster would emerge to hurt me. When I first disclosed the abuse, I was a senior in high school. It was supposed to be one of the best years of my life, but it became one of the darkest. For so long, I had carried the weight of this secret. Speaking out felt like stepping into a storm. That first year after disclosing was filled with more anxiety attacks and sleepless nights than I can count. I constantly lived in the fear that Mr. Cornejo would harm me or my family, no matter how much those around me assured that I was safe. After all, this is the man who made it clear he believed himself untouchable. He would remind me of his military status, claiming he was high up and invincible. He used his position to manipulate and scare me, even telling me in high school that he had someone dig through my phone and make sure I was behaving. These threats weren't empty. They were weapons he wielded to keep me silent and afraid. I've watched him and his attorneys make statements highlighting his military and border patrol service, as if these affiliations make him above the law. But no uniform or title can excuse the horrors he inflicted on me. Today, Your Honor, I'm pleading not just for myself, but for the other victim. I am pleading for justice, for the safety of other children, for the other victim who has suffered because of him. Efren Cornejo must be held accountable. I urge you to impose the maximum sentence on all charges. Your Honor, sentencing him to the maximum isn't just about my justice. It's about protecting every child who could ever come into his path. It's about preventing unimaginable pain I've endured from happening to anyone else. It is essential that he is kept far, far away from children. He is a danger, and I can't bear the thought of any other child enduring what I have. This trauma has shaped so much of who I am today and has left deep scars. It's also given me the determination to advocate for myself and for others who might not yet have the strength to speak out. Justice isn't about punishing him, it's about protecting others, honoring those who he's hurt, and sending a message that this behavior will never be tolerated. Today I reclaim my voice, my life, and my future. Efren Cornejo no longer holds any power over me, and this begins now. While this trauma will be a part of my story, it will not define who I am. I am stronger than what has been done to me. I am determined to heal and move forward. I am stronger than Efren Cornejo. I wouldn't be standing here today if it weren't for the love and support of my family, my husband, and the professionals who have helped me along this journey of healing and throughout this legal process. Your Honor, I'm pleading a request that I be provided with a lifetime order of protection from the defendant in accordance with Arizona's Kaylee's law. Thank you, Your Honor, for allowing me to be heard today.
Thank you.
Deterrence, punishment, but also protection of the community. And I think in this case, based on what we know about Mr. Cornejo and the information provided, it appears on its face that Mr. Cornejo, that probation is the right choice here. That he's a good candidate for probation. I am not recommending that. I am recommending both a combination of either prison and probation or probation plus jail. Because it is not just about protection of the community or rehabilitation. There also needs to be a punishment aspect as well. I'm so sorry. So there's a misunderstanding as to whether or not Alexandra wanted her statement read or not, or just submitted to Your Honor. I don't know if we could inquire if Angie or Rodrigo, if Alexandra or AG is there.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Rodrigo. Send it to the court.
She wanted it read out loud.
Okay, I apologize.
That's okay. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry about that.
That's no problem.
Okay. And so for the record, this is Michelle Sloan. She's an advocate. Thank you, Your Honor.
Your Honor, when I was a child, I endured something that forever changed the trajectory of my life. As a child who lost my father at the tender age of 3, I was left with a void in my heart, a deep yearning for a father figure to guide me, protect me, and fill the emptiness that I carried. But instead of finding safety and love, my innocence was stolen by someone I trusted. This betrayal broke me in ways I am still working to heal. At such a young age, I didn't fully understand what was happening, but I knew it was wrong, and I felt ashamed. I didn't want to burden my mother, who had already endured so much with the loss of my father. I kept the pain to myself, trying to carry a weight far too heavy for a child. I grew up scared. I was terrified of letting anyone get close to me, and to this day, I struggle to trust others. Even the smallest acts of physical touch, even from those who love me the most, can feel overwhelming. As I grew older and began to understand the true meaning of what had been done to me, I fell into a deep depression. As a teenager, I locked myself away in my room, the same way I did as a little girl hiding from him. My room became my sanctuary, the only place I felt safe. I was consumed by darkness and isolation. He had taken advantage of a quiet, shy child, and his actions made me afraid of the entire world. If someone who was supposed to be a protector could hurt me so profoundly, how could I trust anyone else? The loneliness and fear became unbearable, and I began to have thoughts of self-harm. My mother, who has always been a source of love and strength for me, recognized my pain and took me to a therapist. But even then, I couldn't tell the therapist what had happened because I was terrified of him. I didn't want anyone to know. I didn't want to face him. Over time, my mother's unwavering love pulled me out of the dark space, but the scars remained. I carried the weight of those experiences into adulthood, feeling like I was broken. When I finally found love, it came with challenges. I struggled to accept physical affection, even from someone who cared for me deeply. I'm grateful every day that my fiancé was patient and understanding, helping me navigate the effects of my past. Now, as an adult, I have fought to rebuild my life. I have worked hard to trust again, to find joy, to create a future for myself. But when I learned that someone else had been hurt, I was devastated. I felt an overwhelming sense of guilt for not speaking up sooner, for not preventing this from happening to someone else. Today, I tell my story because I want to ensure that no one else experiences the pain and fear that I endured. No one deserves to have their childhood stolen, to live in fear of the world, or to feel utterly alone. I am speaking not just for myself, but for every child who has been silenced, and I hope that my words bring justice and healing. Please do not let him harm another child. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my story.
Thank you.
So, where I was in terms of talking about the purposes of sentencing. And with regard to rehabilitation, I have what Mr. Cornejo provided to the pre-sentence report writer, which is a couple sentences, and then, of course, the letters that have been submitted by his family, which the court has seen. I, as you know, don't get to go after them. I don't know what he's going to say. But the tone that I'm getting is that there's this sense that he, still didn't really do these things, pled guilty for other reasons. And I bring this up because in terms of family support and going forward with probation, this is sex offender probation. He's going to have to acknowledge and admit and go through the treatment. And when this is sex offender probation, he's going to have to acknowledge and admit and go through the treatment. And when you're talking about family support, it needs to be the right kind of family support. People who help him go through this, not people who think that this didn't happen, that these girls are liars, that it's okay for him to be around their children. And I'm not trying to take the focus away from Mr. Cornejo, but just in terms of the whole, the big picture in terms of rehabilitation. So that's a concern that I have. With regard to his military service and his Border Patrol career, in my opinion, and I think at least JV shares that as well, it makes it worse because he should be held to a higher standard, and he has done a disservice to our country by doing this. And so I think, and also he held his status, he used his status against the victim. And so I don't think that should be mitigating. You also have information in front of you about how Mr. Cornejo appears to the outside world, being a good coworker, son, uncle, friend, etc. But the nature, and Your Honor has seen this, the nature of these crimes, they happen behind closed doors. So someone can be a great citizen, a hero to the community, to the outside world, but be, as JV described, a monster behind closed doors. And so, it's commendable, how he has acted in the outside community to the outside world, but that should not diminish the impact of what he has done to not one, but two little girls who were essentially stepdaughters to him. I'm asking you to consider the fact that we have two victims, if Your Honor remembers, two victims who did not know each other. Two victims, that he was in a position of trust as to both of them, the ongoing nature of the offenses. I know that there is, and I think we might have even talked about this at the change of plea, there's a mention of, you have to confine yourself to what he pled to. And I disagree with that slightly. I think the case that is based on has to do with Prop 200 and drugs and for sale and not for sale. And I would submit to you that you can consider the ongoing nature of these offenses, you can consider the other information that's in the pre-sentence report and that you heard at trial under the catch-all of the aggravators, because it is any other factor relevant to the nature and circumstances of the crime. So I'd ask you to consider that. And so what I am recommending, because it also is important to protect the community, both the community at large and community in terms of Mr. Cornejo's family. And it's clear from the letters what their attitude is about, they think it's okay for him to be around children. And so my recommendation is, in order to both protect the community and punish, is that Your Honor impose, because you have 2 counts to work with, that you impose prison on 1 count to be followed by a minimum of 10 years on sex offender probation, or in the alternative to impose probation that includes some jail time, because this is, again, punishment should be a part of this. With regard to, let's see here, restitution, we have victim compensation has submitted a claim that's in the pre-sentence report, and I do have the paperwork. This Barry had a chance to take a second look at it. It's $3,105.22. For JV, I'm asking that you please leave that open for a period of time. She did submit the documentation this week, but because of the holiday, hadn't had a chance to redact and disclose and organize it, so I'm asking that you leave it open. I don't believe AG is asking for restitution, but maybe we might leave that open for her just in case. Other technical things, I apologize. I had forgotten that JB wanted the lifetime order of protection. Normally, I bring the paperwork with me so that the defendant can be served in court. If Your Honor would allow me to ask Lucas to print it and I can fill it out and we can get that done today instead of trying to do it after the fact, I would appreciate it. The other question is registration. And I suppose it sort of depends on how what Your Honor does today. But for me personally, and I'm not speaking for the victim, me personally, I think that it would be okay to leave registration discretionary or deferred to see how Mr. Cornejo does. This is not to take away from my punishment argument, but I think in this situation it would be okay. But that is just my personal opinion. I imagine that JD and AG feel differently. And that is all. Thank you.
Lucas Seychelles.
Ms. Summers started her recommendation to the court by talking about Efren's military law enforcement status. And what I would suggest to the court is that his military background and his law enforcement background is not just a status. Albert Einstein is quoted as saying, "Weakness of attitude becomes weakness of character." I've represented a lot of people over the course of many, many years in my career, but truly none that have had the strength of attitude or the strength of character that Efren has. This courtroom is filled with people behind Efren who love and support him. They've known him for a very long time, some of them decades. These people have interacted with Efren, with his family. Their families have been around Efren. They've had years upon years of getting to know him at a very close level. The letters that you've received and the testimony that you heard from the previous trial all support what Efren's character is, what his attitude over many years has been, and it's been impeccable. They've described for you someone who has given time, heart, and soul, not just to family and not just to friends, but to our country over many years. That is someone of impeccable attitude and someone of impeccable character. Efren started in this process, Your Honor, with extremely serious charges that would have landed him in prison for the rest of his life had he lost at trial. He went to trial. At that trial, the defense had an opportunity to rigorously and thoroughly cross-examine the 2 victims in the case and all of the state's witnesses. It was a very lengthy and rigorous trial, and the jury hung in that case, which demonstrated that that's certainly an indication that the state's proof was not what the state thought it was. And then after that, within short order, we received a plea agreement to 2 probation available offenses to a Class 4 and a Class 6, with registration being discretionary by the court. You want to talk about a tough decision? The court would think, others in this courtroom might think, that you get offered a probation available plea after the kind of charges that Efren was initially facing, that he would jump at a plea that offered him the opportunity of probation, but that wasn't the case. You'd have to know Efren, who stands on principle and honor, to understand what his thought process was about making the decision about the plea in this case, and what it would mean not just for him, but for his family. In keeping with the strength of attitude inherent in someone like Efren, his first consideration was for his family, to include the victims in this case. He chose all of them over his own principles. He chose not putting anyone through the very terrible experience of trial again. He chose potentially and hopefully being able to take care of his family by taking the plea offer in this case. This is the first time that Efren's had to compromise himself and his principles. Your Honor received a letter from Efren, and I can tell the court that after discussing that letter with Efren, that he did his absolute best with humility and honesty in his letter to the court. He accepts responsibility, which under the circumstances of this case and the complexity of all of those circumstances, to include that first trial, is a very complex dynamic. I won't reiterate the mitigation from my sentencing memorandum, Your Honor. I won't reiterate the numerous character letters that describe Efren in detail and what people know him to be like. And I do know that this court is wise and considered in what I'm calling this complex dynamic. The state's asked you to consider the catch-all for sentencing, the chronic or ongoing nature of offenses that a jury hung on and that Efren didn't plead guilty to. He pled guilty to 2 specific offenses, so I would ask that Your Honor not consider any sort of ongoing nature. I think that would be a disservice and an injustice. Just like everything that Efren has done in his life, if this court gives him the opportunity of probation, he will apply himself to probation with the absolute best of his ability. The compelling mitigation that exists in this case supports the sentence of probation on each count. The low-risk needs assessment done by probation, which is a thorough assessment, places Efren as an incredibly low risk, in fact, one of the lowest I've ever seen, at a 5, in terms of his risk to the community. We are asking that you give Efren the opportunity of probation, no incarceration time. We're asking you to give the appropriate and compelling weight to the mitigation that exists in his case, and we're asking the court to defer the registration requirement. Thank you.
Mr. Cornejo, do you wish to address the court?
Keep summary.
Sorry, I'm going to wait for that document because I want that all to be done at the same time. Did you send it to me?
I did, she's printing it right now. It will take me a moment to fill out part of it.
Judge, can we approach the bench?
Sure can.
original be sealed and then the other portion with this address either be redacted out or not included in the filed unsealed version, however the court would do that.
Ms. Holmes?
So I am not sure that I'm comfortable sealing it because the purpose of the order of protection is so that people can find.
All right. So as it relates to JB's request for a lifetime no contact injunction, that order is granted. The court does find that Mr. Cornejo has been convicted of a completed or preparatory violation of ARS 131402, which is a felony offense included in Title 13, Chapter 14. Court otherwise finds that the injunction is appropriate. It's therefore ordered issuing the lifetime no contact injunction in favor of the victim named in this order against the defendant. Mr. Cornejo, you're prohibited from having any contact whatsoever with JB for the rest of your life unless this order is dismissed by this court. Do you understand?
Yes.
Court will show that, or the record reflect that the order was signed in open court. Ms. Summers, I'm going to give this back to you, or Randy, you can give it to Ms. Berry for their signature. I'm going to order that it's filed here in court. I'm also going to order the clerk to redact Mr. Cornejo's address from that document on any public records website to ensure that his address isn't broadcast. Mr. Cornejo, I've given a lot of thought. Go ahead, please. Please. Before I get to the court's comments, Ms. Berry, the sentencing memorandum that you supplied to the court, I'm going to order that it's filed under seal.
Thank you, Judge.
It will not be opened unless further order of a superior court judge. It contains a lot of mitigation material that would not otherwise be available to the public, including Mr. Cornejo's personal history and other things that are not germane to the public's understanding of the case. Mr. Cornejo, I've given a lot of thought to your sentencing, as I'm sure you knew I would. And as I think everyone has expressed, this case is a difficult one. And I think the reason the case is so difficult is because of the dichotomy that you present to the court. You have followed the court's orders to the letter throughout the time that I've been assigned to this case. You've requested time and time again to be able to leave the jurisdiction for whatever purposes you needed to leave, whether it be work or otherwise. You have complied with the court's direction almost to the letter. I'm certain that that's the way that you serve the community, both in law enforcement and the military. But the dichotomy is that you compare that against what happened in this case. And I want to be really clear. I wasn't there. Nobody else in this courtroom was there. JB was there. AG was there. I heard the testimony, though. And I understand you have a lot of people in this courtroom who support you, and I'm glad that you have that support, because you're going to need it. But the thing that strikes the court in cases such as this is it's very difficult to know the true nature of the people who commit offenses like this. And it's very easy for people to hide their true nature from even the people that are closest to them. I know you all don't want to believe that Mr. Cornejo did this. And I know you all believe with all of your heart he did. That's why we have trials. But Mr. Cornejo, if you're going to succeed in the next rest of your life that you're going to have, what you have to understand is Ms. Summers isn't false when she says success in this kind of probation is the ability to not only talk openly about things you don't want to talk about, but also talk about the wrongs that you've done. You have unleashed a grievous harm on the two victims in this case. And whether everybody who supports you wants to believe you or wants to disbelieve them or however it is, the fact is that occurred. And how that occurred, testimony spoke for itself. And your statements to the court spoke for itself when you testified and when you wrote your letter. If you minimize your behavior, even the slightest bit, when you're on sex offender conditions, you will be back before me. And it's not a prediction, it's not a hope, it's nothing other than my experience. This court's experience with folks who are on sex offender conditions of probation is the one place that they often fail is if they are not willing to accept the reality of what they've done. So that's going to take a big leap on your behalf. Whether you want to believe it or not, things happen in this case that need to be addressed. And whether your friends and family want to believe it or not, there's a portion of you that they don't know us quite as well as they think they do. And everyone's going to have to be able to wrap their heads around that and move forward and admit what happened. That's all there is to it. I understand why JV, and be clear on it, everybody else who wrote a letter said the same thing on the other side of the courtroom. They would want nothing less than me to send you to prison for 3 years and basically give you the harshest punishment I could. I understand why they asked for that. I'm not saying I understand how it feels to be you or how it feels to be JV or how it feels to be AG, but I certainly understand that if my loved one was harmed in the way that they have been harmed, I will want every measure of justice I could get. But that's why I don't get to make that decision if it was my family member. What I see from this is I need to make sure that the person you say you are is the person who you really are. If I sent you to prison today, you get out in 3 years, there would be nothing to oversee you. There would be no progress. There would be no protection. There would be no efforts at rehabilitation. It would be purely punitive. And if you truly did all of these things, which I think there's a lot of evidence to suggest that there's more to this story than necessarily what the plea is, but I'm considering what the plea itself says, that means there could be more victims. And I can't have that on my conscience. And I think what I'm telling you this is, I'm doing this not because I think you don't deserve to have some kind of retribution, for lack of a better word, but I'm doing this because I think it's the best way that I have available to me under the terms of the plea to try as hard as I can to make sure that if you are the predator that the victims say you are, that I minimize the possibility that there's a third. If you go into this with the attitude that you've done nothing wrong, I will see you again. And I will remember what I told you today. Because hopefully we all live very long and productive lives, and I'm here still if and when that happens. And I'm still on this bench. And there's one thing I can guarantee, Mr. Cornejo. Because of how you stood out at the beginning of the case, when I didn't know anything about the case, and then because of the facts of the case, I don't remember a lot of cases. I'll remember this one. And that's not a situation you want to find yourself in front of a judge on a violation of probation. Because I'm giving you the chance right now to put into effort and put into action the words that you put on paper that you're willing to do what it takes to make sure that the community is protected and that people understand that you're serious about it. If you can't do that, you might as well quit now. And I'm also going to make it a lot longer than 10 years because I don't think that there's a shelf life on your particular case as far as how long is long enough to protect the community. I think your case is the kind of case where we start with the presumption that you have to do it for the rest of your life, and you prove to me or my successor, if it takes that long, that you've done your duty. That's it. So you're going to have to earn your way off probation as opposed to timing it out. And the longer you're on probation, the more likely you are to get benefit from the services, and the highly more likely the community is to be protected. But I'm going through this long-winded way of telling you you're putting on probation because I want there to be no mistake about it, that I will not hesitate to revoke it if you don't live up to it. I will not. And it doesn't matter if you fill the courtroom with people that will support you and tell me that you're a different person than what the paper says. I will remember the case, I will remember JV and AG, and I will remember you and the facts. shot. Clear? The court has considered in aggravation the extensive emotional, psychological harm on the victims. It's considered that there are multiple victims. It's also considered that the defendant is in a position of trust. In mitigation, the court has considered the defendant's acceptance of responsibility by taking a plea. It has considered his community service in the military and the law enforcement community, although it doesn't weigh that specifically as a mitigating factor. It's also considered his family and community support. It's a judgment of the court probation is appropriate. It's a judgment of the court in position of sentence is suspended. As to amended count 1, it's a judgment of the court. The defendant is placed on probation for the rest of his natural life beginning today's date. As to count 13, it's a judgment of the court. He's placed on probation for a period of 3 years because that's the maximum I can give you on that term. Right? It says 3 years. Is it lifetime on that one too?
It is lifetime on that, because it's chapter 14.
It's no less than 3 years.
No less than 3 years? Okay, lifetime on both then, even better. Because at the end of the day, Mr. Cornejo, if you violate on both of them, the court still has the opportunity to ensure that I give you consecutive sentences. So keep that in mind as well. Just because I'm placing you on probation doesn't mean that you would necessarily get the maximum of 1. You could still face 5.75 years in prison. As conditions of your probation, you will not have any contact with any victim in any form. You're required to prioritize the payment of restitution. You will be on sex offender conditions. You'll pay $65 a month in probation fees. There's a $20 time payment